Hi, this is Ken Renner, real estate broker here in Santa Rita Ranch in North Austin Metro, Liberty Hill to be exact. And I'm here talking to a friend of mine and also an amazing associate colleague that helps us be able to save on our property taxes. I know it's going to be a hot topic here, being in April. You'll be getting all of your assessments sooner or later before the end of the month. And you need to know what your rights, you need to know what the whole process is, you need to know if you know all the things that are going to help you save money because we've had a market's been changing and values have been fluctuating, especially in the resale market. We were just having a conversation before this podcast. Is that the tax assessor does not like when things are going up. They're slow. They're quick to go up on their assessments, but they're slow to come down. So I just looked at my 5 properties I have in this county, and I'm not too happy with a couple of those assessments they have on there. And so the good news in the state of Texas, you have the opportunity to protest the valuation of the home. So Richie Gill and his partner Denson they're Gill Denson and Associates. They're professional property tax protesters, and one of the things that if you know me for any period of time, I have a network of help, a network of experts that help me to help my clients and myself to save money or to best position them and their properties. So Richie, yeah, we've been working together. You've been doing my property protests for the last couple of years, and many of my clients. And so, tell us what's going on with the market. Tell us what's going on with the property tax. Anything new changes on how they do things? Introduce
Yeah,
yourself, and
Ken.
then
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And as always, I love it when your clients call us and I can have a discussion with them. You have some very well informed, educated clients, and so I always enjoy those conversations. So thank you again for having me, and happy to answer any questions and share any insights I can on property taxes. So, Williamson County released values just in the last few days here. We're seeing a mixed bag of some increases, some properties staying the same, some modest decreases. But the big theme of what we're seeing right now is a pretty large mismatch between what the appraisal numbers are showing versus reality of the market. And
Mhm.
so we're thinking the county is pretty far off on a lot of properties out there and really should have been appraising them lower. And so just like you said in the intro, every property owner in the state of Texas has the right to file a protest to adjust that appraised value. And so this is the perfect time to exercise that right.
Yeah, so that's we've taught classes going back 20 years on this, and a lot of people don't know they have the opportunity to protest their taxes, protest the valuation of the taxes. And so one of the things we were chatting about before too is that we do work with a lot of investors in multiple counties. And one of the things that I'm going to say right up front in this video is to make sure that your tax address, your address at the county tax record matches your mailing address, your home address, wherever you get your mail, because we've seen a lot of times they just send the property tax appraisal or the bill to the property and the tenant doesn't know what to do with it, and then you don't get the opportunity to protest. So definitely check any of your properties, whether it be a primary residence or as an investment property, does it have the proper mailing address? So
Yeah, and one of the things I'll say, Ken, is that the county is actually not required to send you a notice if the value stays the
okay,
same or goes down. And so
okay.
that's one really important note is that if you don't get a notice in the mail, you're right, it could be sent to the wrong address, or it just wasn't sent at all to begin with, even if the mailing address was correct. And so let's say that the county decreased your value by 3%. They're not going to maybe not send you a notice. Some counties do, but don't expect that notice in the mail. So that means you need to look online to find your value or call someone like us and we'll be able to help you find the
Is
value and discuss it with you.
is that with all counties?
That's a state law. It's with all counties, so they don't have to send it unless there's a certain threshold for which they have to send it by law. But if it decreases, they do not. And so it's tricky because a lot of times people won't get the notice in the mail. May 15th comes and goes. They forget to protest because they never got that letter. And meanwhile, they're being grossly overappraised and they never file their protest. And so if a county decreases your value by 1%, they technically don't have to send that
Oh.
notice. And that can cause a lot of problems and people not exercising their protest rights.
Well, and that's part of the it being in the know. That's why we educate, because I didn't know that they don't even have to send you a notice, because that's what we're expecting. If they only dropped it 1% and the market dropped 5%, we're missing out
Yes.
on a lot of well, we're paying a lot in taxes. I just was at a listing over here appointment, and I looked at his valuations, 820,000. I'm giving him a valuation of 690,000. I mean,
Yeah.
so,
Oh yeah.
and he was, that was last year too. And he was like going, I go, you
Right.
could have fought that. I mean, you could have fought that. He goes,
Yeah.
oh, go figure, it was like, so, so yeah, our idea is to make sure that our clients are very well informed and also with the facts. So let's start with deadlines. How does the calendar work throughout the year?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Ken. So basically, every appraisal coming out from local appraisal districts is based on a valuation date of January 1st. And so when the county is coming up with their valuation, they're trying to pinpoint what the value was on January 1st of the year. And so they will send that notice out sometime in the spring. And so Williamson just sent them out in the last few days. Many of the other counties will follow suit if they have not already in the next week or so. The protest deadline statewide is May 15th or 30 days after the appraisal notice was sent. So that's a really important date. If you miss that, there's not much you can do about it. So you really have to make sure it's filed on time. And one thing to note is the USPS Postal Service has changed the way they postmark. And so it's not, when you drop the envelope into your mailbox, it's not always postmarked the same day because now they're doing regional sorting. And so it sometimes takes a day or two to get to the regional facility to get a postmark. Just a side note, be careful with that if
It's
you're
true.
mailing.
April 15th, I took it to the post office on April 15th for my income tax, and it posted April 16th. And I was
Yeah.
like, uh, and
And it,
I had a penalty. Unfortunately, I was able to get most of that waived, but it was like
yeah.
$1,800 mistake. I'm like, in the post, I mean, personally took it to the post office,
Yeah.
dropped it inside the post office. No, it
And
didn't.
same thing with protests. So one thing our office will make sure happens is when you work with us, we will make sure that gets filed in time in the proper legal avenue. So okay, you have the protest deadline, which is May 15th. After that, the hearings for these protests with the appraisal review board is all throughout the summer. So we're attending hearings on all the counties starting in late May all the way through September, depending on when the county schedules our hearings. Once the hearings are finalized and what they call certification happens, meaning they certify the value of the appraisal roll, then tax bills are generated usually late in the fall. So we're talking October, November. That's when you actually get the bill. And a lot of people confuse that with when they get the bill, then it's time to protest. No, the protest deadline was months ago. So you have to make sure you
Mhm.
protest now. You get the bill in the fall, and then that bill is due January 31st of the following year.
So isn't there do they allow, because I have a lot of out of state people live out of state, and do they allow for like a Zoom type of protest, or do you have to do it how does it work when somebody can't actually get here?
Yeah, so some counties do allow virtual hearings. Some allow phone call hearings. Some allow Zoom. There's multiple formats, so they do allow that. I will say most of the negotiation and a lot of negotiation we do is in person. We feel like it's a little more effective. So I think in person is a good option. But yes, most counties do allow and accommodate virtual hearings.
So one of the things I've been noticing that's been good news is we've been seeing the tax rates have been dropping, and I haven't seen it drop recently. But tell us, when do they actually set the tax rate? Because that's one thing that everybody misses. They got, well, I got my valuation, but if you look, and can you protest go to the hearings and protest the tax rate?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So there's two main components when you get your tax bill. One is the valuation, which you can protest and you have more control over that. The second part is the tax rate, and so the tax rate you really do not have any direct control over.
Okay.
That is controlled by the politicians. When you vote for bonds, that affects the tax rate,
Hmm.
and that tax rate is generated after the certification date. So sometime in the fall, the county basically takes the appraisal roll, divides it by all the different budgets of the entities, and generates a new tax rate. And that happens annually. That's an annual process. The last couple of years, we have had some what's called rate compression from the state, meaning tax rates have been bought down by the state government. Those could expire in coming years, so you have to be careful with that. But on the rate, there's really nothing you can do directly. It's on the values where you can protest.
Okay. All right. So no effect on the rate. Now tell me about compression. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so basically, rate compression is has become popular with politicians, and it makes sense. It's a good approach for the state government to take. But basically, the state is sending money to local school districts on behalf of property owners. So they are writing a check on behalf of every property owner in the state directly to local school districts using state funds. And then when they do that, the local entities reduce the tax rate proportionate to the amount that they're receiving from the state government. So it provides direct relief to all property owners. It's not just those with homesteads, it's investors, commercial properties. So it's every property in the state of Texas receives that benefit. Because we hear about all this tax relief through the homestead, which is
Mhm.
great. If you have a homestead, that's awesome, and you're going to
What's the
receive a
number
benefit
now
from that.
on the homesteaded property on my house here? What is it, 150, 140? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so the last session it increased from 100,000 to 140,000, and if you are 65 and older, it's an additional 60 on top of that, so a $200,000 exemption for those folks.
3 more years. 3 more years.
Something to look forward to, Ken.
Yeah, yeah, looking forward to lesser taxes and free money from the government that I've been paying into all these years. So yeah, tell me some of the pitfalls that people fall into when they're, they're obviously missing the deadline is no fun.
Yeah, so a couple common pitfalls we see with property taxes. One is making sure you have all the exemptions you qualify for.
Yeah,
So if
tell us
it's
about the
if it's your
exemptions.
homestead, yeah, if it's your homestead, make sure you have that. That can be thousands of dollars of missed savings. Everyone needs to have their homestead applied. Usually there's an online application process in these local appraisal districts where you can apply for that. You really don't need to have a professional firm like us help. We are happy to do so, but you can do that on yourself very effectively. You need to make sure your driver's license address matches. File that online, get that taken care of. That's the number one pitfall. Number two pitfall, there are so many people over-appraised out there that just do not protest their property taxes, and they are truly just leaving money on the table. I mean, it's almost sad for me to see that the amount of people that just don't understand this process that leave money on the table. So that's a big one.
And that's why you're here, and that's why we're informing you is that I like the guy down the street that's eight
Yeah,
twenty evaluation. I'm saying the 690 is what it's worth, and so
right.
that's huge. Right, our tax rate's 2%. That's like $20,000. I mean, it's
Yeah,
I mean, two
that's
thousand
huge.
dollars. It's like yeah. So tell me, we've got the over 65 exemption. You've got the vet if you're a veteran, VA with disabilities, right? Or there's a disability
Yep.
exemption. And one of the questions I get a lot is how can I transfer my, let's say, my over 65 exemption to my next house? Tell us how that works because we have a lot of people maybe moving up or moving down. And tell us if you're moving up to a more expensive place in a different county, then how does that work?
Yeah. So this is a point we're asked a lot about. So you can what's called port your tax exemption from one county to another, from one house to another, even if it's within the same county. It's not a big deal. If it's within the same county, it's actually very easy. You let the county know, hey, I'm moving from this house to that house, and the percentage of exemption will follow you. So the ceiling itself, if you're 65 and older, that won't stay the same. It'll change proportionate to the value, but that will follow you, and you can get that transferred if you contact your local appraisal district. That's very important.
Will that freeze? Okay, so like say I'm 65 now, and it's frozen at $900,000. As far as the school taxes are concerned, if I move to a $2 million house, what is that? How would those numbers work?
So it's a percentage calculation. So let's say your school taxes are frozen at 50% of the market value. You got $1 million market value. You're frozen at or your ceiling is at 500,000. If you buy a $2 million house, the ceiling will proportionally increase percentage as you move from one property to the other.
And then we got a lot of new construction going on. So sometimes the house maybe it's built and closes in June or July. What is it going to be? Do we get a free ride or like a land value ride on it for the rest of the year if there was nothing on that piece of ground?
So for new properties in general, let's say it was under construction as of January 1, you bought it in July, just like you said. In that case, the county is going to try to value the construction site. And so they'll do land value plus a percentage completion. And so it's not a free ride, unfortunately. You still will receive a tax bill. And this is an opportunity, again, to protest because the county a lot of times has those completion percentages wrong. So if you're buying a property in April and it was under construction January 1st, they might think the property was 100% done January 1st and it wasn't. And we can get that corrected in the protest hearing itself and get the tax bill lowered, even though it was a construction site January 1.
Okay. So what's the deadline? Okay, the deadline per you're going to get your assessment in April. You're going to get if you get an assessment, and then you're going to November is when that's due, and then in the end of January is when you actually have to pay for it, right?
Yep, that's right. So deadline is in May to file the protest. The bill is usually issued in November, and then end of January is when you're going to actually pay the taxes.
Okay. So Richie, tell me a little bit more about what's the exact process and how if I'm doing it myself, doing a DIY, how do I do that? And then if I hire you, what's the benefits and the costs involved in that?
Yeah. So there's a couple different important stages of a protest. First is actually filing the protest. You need to make sure you file the right type of protest. There's actually two types. There's market and then equity. You need to make sure it's sent to the right office. And then also we always request copies of evidence. So submitting the protest, the first step. The most important step though is preparing for the hearing. So after you file it, you need to start preparing for the hearing because that hearing will come up quick and they'll tell you when you got to come in. So you got to look at what properties are selling for in the area, market comps to see recent sales. Take those sales and adjust them back to the subject property. You can't just take A versus B. You have to adjust A for changes in square foot, condition, lot size, location, age of roof, all that from A to B. We do all those adjustments as a professional firm. If you're an individual, you'll need to do that before going into the hearing. Second part of that is on an equity hearing, you're going to want to see how you're being taxed versus other similar properties in the area. So you'll want to take their tax appraisals. Again, you're going to have to adjust them to your subject property and see if there's discrepancies in that. Also looking at the appraisal card to see if there's errors in the appraisal card. There's about 70 different fields we look at as a firm to make sure everything from condition rating, effective age of construction, and everything in between is correct. That's the big part of the protest. There's a hearing, which is there's two hearings. One's an informal hearing and one is a formal hearing. The informal hearing is meeting with a member of the appraisal staff and talking to them about your evidence and saying, this is what I have, this is what I believe the value is, and they will either accept or deny your request. And if you don't come to terms with them, you go to the formal hearing, which is called an appraisal review board hearing. And that's kind of what I call a small claims court environment. You're going to be presenting your case of why you believe you should have a reduction in your tax appraisal. You got to convince what I call the jury, which is a ARB panel of three local citizens. The county's going to present their case. And you got to remember, the county does this all day. So even though there's tons of errors, they are good at presenting these cases. And so when you go in there, you have to know your numbers. I see the biggest mistake is people go in there and say, my taxes are too high. I don't
Yeah,
like
of
paying a high tax
course.
bill. And that's just not an effective strategy. You have to have numbers, you have to have evidence, you have to follow certain procedures in these hearings. And so you have to come prepared, have your numbers, have your case built, and be ready to rebuttal. They're going to look at your evidence and they're going to try to discredit it in front of the ARB panel. After that, the ARB votes, decides on whether or not you get a reduction. One more small point, Ken, is if we, as a firm, if we do this whole process and represent you, if we go to the ARB hearing and we present a really compelling case, and the panel for some reason is having a bad day and doesn't agree with us, we
Yeah.
can go to what's called binding arbitration, which is a third advanced phase through the Texas Comptroller's office. That is something that homeowners, I really don't advise go through that process. It is a much more advanced, more technical process, but we do it on behalf of homeowners all the time. So if we go through ARB, don't get what we want, we can take it to the Comptroller's office and we'll make sure our clients get a fair shake on their tax bill. So all of that, manage the whole process from start to finish. If you hire a firm, again, you can do it on your own or hire someone. That's your choice as a taxpayer. We charge a percentage of however much we save our clients. And so, Ken, we've had this partnership for many years, and anyone that you refer,
Right.
we give an exclusive discount to. So normally, if someone comes to us, we charge 35% of the tax savings for anyone you refer. When they go on our website, there's a place to enter a code. They'll enter Renner. They can also call and mention your name,
Okay.
and we'll give them a 25% contingency fee. So a pretty
Nice.
substantial discount. And one thing I'll mention is that 25%, it's going to be the best rate you're going to find online. If there's other companies you see doing 25%, there's some online outfits that offer similar rates. They do not go in and look at each one of these cases and negotiate. Sometimes they'll do like big spreadsheet type stuff and try to get 1 or 2% here. We dig into every single detail. We have what I believe some of the best consultants in the entire state, looking at every single one of these, being as aggressive as possible, making sure nothing is missed in these hearings.
So one of the things that we were discussing earlier too is the fact that new construction is doing pretty well, and with all things being considered here. But the resale market is suffering, competing against these new homes. But I can't find comps. Like even for my house, nothing's sold recently in the last 2 years. That's of my size and shape, and So but there's plenty of new ones that have closed, but I don't think the tax assessor likes us using new homes.
Yeah, so that's kind of where the art of what we do comes in, of looking at the numbers, finding if there are no comps, we may have to expand the market area a little bit. We may have to get creative on what's called an equity argument on how they're taxing other homes. So that's where we have to get creative. And a lot of times, the situation you described is why the county can be so wrong on their tax appraisals.
Yeah.
So just like you're having a challenge finding comps, the county is having just as much or more because they don't have access to the MLS. They don't have access to the database you do. They rely on whatever they can scrap together with the resources they have. So it is a problem, and that's kind of where the art of the protest comes in.
So do they allow you to use new construction if there's no other comps?
So you can. It's not a true. It's not as good of a comp as a
Not an arm's
resale
length
would. That
transaction.
right. It's not an arm's length transaction. Sometimes these builders are. Sometimes they're motivated to sell quickly. Sometimes there's all kinds of funny things that get involved in these transactions that kind of distort the prices. And so it's
Well, we were just
usually
talking.
not a clear case.
It was at like $800,000 house. Some of these builders are offering $50,000 in financing incentives and discounting the property. So,
Right.
and that is effectively $50,000 off the financing is really even a lower valuation than the actual sales price, obviously, because they're being basically handing the money back. So,
Right.
does that
Right.
take in any consideration, or we just say, no, we're not dealing with new construction issues?
So if a client comes to us with a new construction property and has those types of financing incentives and rebates, we will use that to our advantage and the client's
Hmm.
advantage to get a reduction. And so we can back into the numbers
Okay.
and come into a net effective sales price backing into that. Because like you said, those are unique situations for new homes. And we can back into numbers that make sense that get
Mhm.
reductions for our clients and back out those rebates.
So in days past, we used to say if it's any lower, if the assessment's any lower than your current than what you paid for it then that year, then don't mess with it. If it's higher, then send your closing statement in, and it should come down to that sales price. So is that the proper procedure to do that?
And so it's actually a little more nuanced than that. And actually, Williamson County was the first county in the state after COVID to do monthly time adjustments.
Mhm.
It's a really interesting topic. They basically invented this concept, and a lot of other counties took it on. But if you purchase a property in September, they do monthly appreciation or depreciation
Mhm.
time adjustments for each month after that until January 1st. And so, because of that, it's really not as simple as it used to be. In
Right.
the old days, you could just say, "Hey, here's my closing statement." A lot of times, for the benefit of the client, we can actually take the closing statement and then we can apply some market changes that could show a reduction below the closing statement. And so that's important to note is that you can time adjust, you can play with that a little bit. And so there's some work we can do there.
Okay, I get asked a lot of times, especially in our community here, to run comps. But used to be that it was 3 months before and 2 months after the January 1st is what they did. But as of last year and the year before, you said they changed that. They use the entire year and base it on this silly formula.
Yeah, so they've been taking the entire year, and then they'll take 2 or 3 months afterwards. And that window can change depending on sales volume, but that's generally the procedure they're taking now. So the entire year plus generally 2 months of the following.
Okay, so according to the Austin Board of Realtors, we were down about 3.5% from last year. Are they going to take that into consideration?
Probably not, unfortunately. And that's part of the problem. Sometimes they're using comps from January of 2025 for your January 2026 tax appraisal valuation, and that causes all kinds of problems. And so you have to time adjust that. The market has changed. You have to bring
Yeah.
that down.
So I noticed that a couple of years ago you guys did a ton of protests, but last year was a little bit thin because they actually did drop the valuation. A lot of people didn't. There wasn't room on the meat on the bone for them to go down any further. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, that's a fair interpretation. I really think this year in 2026 we're going to be very productive on getting reductions with people. The initial values I'm seeing, there's definitely room to get somewhat substantial reductions for some of our clients. And so you're right. Some years we get bigger reductions than others. It just depends on where the county comes in at. And I think this is going to be a good year for people protesting that come in with the evidence. I think there's reductions that are supported by the numbers.
All right. Well, so that's a lot of great information, and I'm looking forward to having you fight my taxes because I don't have to go down to the county and fight them and deal with all the disgruntled other people that are there. And that's one thing to remember: if you do it yourself, be nice to the tax assessor. It goes a
Yeah,
long way. The
you're
appraisal.
exactly right. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of times this staff is overworked and underappreciated, and they get a lot of people coming in there complaining and yelling at them. So
Yeah.
don't be another one of them. They do a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about it again. It's a 25% instead of 35% of the actual tax savings. So if you save us $1,000, it's going to be 250 you, and I get to keep the 750. And then how do they get a hold of you? It's like gilldenson.com. Can you go ahead and spell that? And
Yeah. So the best way, Ken, is to go to our website, gildenson.com. That's GILLDENSON.com, gildenson.com. You can also Google us. You'll find us real easily. There's a get started page on our website. On page 2, they will enter the code Renner to get
okay.
that 25% contingency fee. They can sign up fully online if they'd like. If they would like to call and talk to someone on our staff, they can even talk to me if they'd like. There is a phone number on our website. It's a 1-800 number, but it does go to our local Austin based office, and be happy to talk through any questions you have. Even if you're not ready to protest, if you just have a property tax question, call our office. We want to be a resource to you. And again, Ken, we love talking to anyone you send our way. So have them give us a call, or just go directly on our website and make sure you enter that renter code to get that discounted fee.